So, today we're heading to a small coastal town in Spain. And this place is so beautiful, it genuinely looks like it was pulled straight from a postcard. But lurking just beneath the sun drenched walls in these charming little streets lies an absolutely terrifying urban legend, the story of a ghost who never, ever stopped waiting for her groom.
And that's really the question at the heart of this whole thing, isn't it? Because in a place like Celebrena, it seems like the brighter the sun shines during the day, the darker and deeper the shadows get at night. And, in those shadows, something ancient and heartbroken is waiting.
All right, let's dive right in. So our story revolves around this guy, Matteo Guerrero. He's a 19-year-old architecture student from Madrid. He came to Celebrena to study its ancient churches, its centuries-old homes, totally unaware that he was about to get tangled up in the town's most horrifying secret. You see, Celebrena is kind of like two different towns. By day, it's exactly what you'd picture. It's picturesque, it's alive with the sound of church bells. But Matteo noticed pretty quickly that as soon as the sun started to set, something changed. The air got colder, and the streets just emptied out. It was as if people were actually fleeing from the darkness itself. So while he was researching an old church, Matteo kind of wandered off into the cemetery right next to it. And right there, that's where he stumbles onto the first piece of the puzzle, an old, broken-down wedding arch just standing there over this one patch of earth. It had all these dead, dried flowers on it, and the soil underneath, it was way darker than anywhere else. A weird sight for sure, but he didn't really think much of it at first. And yeah, that little discovery in the cemetery, that was the trigger. Everything changed after that. That very night, back in his guest house, Matteo's little academic trip turned into a complete and total nightmare. At first, it was subtle stuff. The faint sound of fabric, like a dress, rustling just outside his window. Then he saw a flash of white in a deserted alleyway. It looked almost like a woman in a long gown. And then it started getting more direct. A cold wind just rushed into his room on a perfectly warm night. And then, the most disturbing thing of all, fresh, muddy footprints on the stone street leading from right outside his guest house, all the way back to that old cemetery. Now, most people would have just locked their doors, right? Not Matteo. His curiosity got the better of him. He actually decided to follow the tracks. So as the church bell strikes 2 in the morning, he finds himself back in that silent cemetery. And there she was, standing right under that broken wedding arch, a figure in a tattered, ancient-looking wedding gown, her face hidden by a veil, just waiting. Matteo took a step closer, and the figure slowly turned towards him. As her veil shifted, he saw her face, and it was just impossibly white, her eyes burning with this deep, ancient horror. And staining her cheeks were these dark streaks, like tears of dried blood that were shed centuries ago. And that's when he noticed her feet weren't touching the ground. Before he could even let out a scream, poof, she was gone. Just vanished into thin air. You can imagine, Matteo was completely shaken. Who wouldn't be? He obviously didn't sleep a wink that night. The next morning, he went straight to the old caretaker of the guest house, desperate for some kind of answer. And that's when he finally learned the history behind the apparition he had seen. And the second Matteo brought up that wedding arch, you could just see the color drain from the caretaker's face. He knew exactly who Matteo had seen. He called her the corpse bride, a heartbroken spirit who, even after all these years, is still waiting. So the caretaker lays out this whole tragic tale for him. Way back in 1889, a young woman named Isabella Romero was supposed to marry a man named Javier Morales at that very arch. But Javier, he never showed up. He'd run off with another woman. Isabella, completely heartbroken, refused to leave. She waited all night long under that arch for a groom who was never coming back. By dawn, she had collapsed and died, literally from a broken heart. Now, you'd think knowing the story would bring him some sort of peace, right? Wrong. It did the exact opposite. That night, the haunting escalated from just a passive sighting to this aggressive, terrifying pursuit. The spirit wasn't just waiting in the cemetery anymore. She had followed him home. So he's in his room, trying to calm down, and he hears it again. Footsteps. But this time, they stop right outside his door. A dark shadow falls across the crack of light underneath. Then, he just watches in pure horror as the doorknob starts to turn, slowly, deliberately. The door creaks open. but there was nothing there. Just an empty hallway. He probably breathed a sigh of relief for like half a second, and then he glanced at his window. And she was there, outside, staring in at him, her face pressed right up against the glass, those terrible blood-stained eyes locked directly onto his. Then, just like that, she was gone again, leaving him in absolute terror. Okay, so the next morning, Matteo has had enough. He bolts. He runs to the one place he thinks might be able to help, the local church. He spills everything to the priest, and the priest, after listening to this whole insane story, asks him one single crucial question. And that's when it hits him, a memory. That first day in the cemetery, he'd picked up a few of those dried flowers from the wedding arch, just as a strange little souvenir. Well, the priest explained the horrifying truth. The spirit of Isabella now believed that Matteo was her groom, finally come back to claim her after more than 100 years of waiting. The priest's advice was pretty simple. Get out now. Don't even wait. Terrified, Matteo rushed back to the guest house to grab his bags, determined to escape this town and its ghost. But it was already too late. But as he's running back to his room, he sees it. Fresh, muddy footprints. And this time, they weren't just on the street. They were on his doorstep. She was already there. He looked out the window and saw the sky was just rapidly turning black, this unnatural storm brewing right overhead. He's just frantically jamming his stuff into a bag when the lights start to flicker. On, off, plunging the room into the strobing chaos. And then, with a final pop, they went out completely. He was trapped in total pitch-black darkness. The storm finally broke. A huge crash of thunder shook the whole house, and a bolt of lightning lit up the entire room for just a split second. And in that flash of light, he saw her. She wasn't outside the window anymore. She wasn't in the hall. She was inside the room. Standing right in front of him, the corpse bride had finally come for her groom. It took a while, but the caretaker finally managed to break down the door. Matteo was gone. His body was found hours later, right back where this whole thing started. He was lying in the cemetery, covered in wet mud, directly under that broken wedding arch. The legend says she finally got her groom and dragged him with her into eternity. And that really leaves you with this one final chilling question. See? Matteo didn't go looking for this legend. He just stumbled upon it. Which makes you wonder, when an ancient story decides that you are a part of its ending, is there really any way to escape?